Welcome to another Friday Functions video. In this video, we're going to give you an introduction to arrays. This is for beginners who are getting used to using arrays in Flow, but it'll also give you a foundation for building on this knowledge. This is part 1 of 2. Part 1 is for beginners, and part 2 will be later on in June for more advanced users. So let's get started. First of all, what the heck is an array? An array, we see it every day in the real world, right? We make lists, right? We make our grocery list. We make our list of people we love. We make our list of all the things that we have to do on the weekend. And we make a list of all the videos we have to make for our Power Apps and Flow YouTube community, right? These are all the ways that we use to organize things together under a topic. And so it kind of creates an object of things that we're going to reuse later to remember what we need to do. Computers also need lists and a way to organize things so that they can retrieve them later. And so the way we define this in computers is that an array is a data structure that contains a group of elements, right? These elements are normally of the same data type, such as a number or a string. Arrays are commonly used in computer programs to organize data so that a related set of values can be easily sorted or searched. So very often you'll see people put arrays into an array variable, and then they can call that variable later to do any number of things with it. Okay? Now, thinking again of what the computer views as an array, the actual array is very much like a package of variables. So right here we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes all joined together in one array. Okay? Each of those boxes can contain something that relates to this array. The way we identify each box is not really by saying blue box, orange box, green box, any of that. We actually name the boxes according to their index number, and we always start at 0. So the first box in this array is index 0, and the gray one is index 2. Now, an array always has something in it. It's never empty like this. It will have either a string value in it, like in this case, we have a string of product names. It can have numbers in it. In this case, you see integers. When there's no decimals, it's not float, it's integer. When there's decimals, we use float. We could also have like yes or no, 0, 1 values, which is Boolean. Or we could nest arrays inside of an array. So there's lots of things that can be in an array. Now, when we're working with arrays in Flow, and we will do this together, we can actually create an array of our own. Just dynamically create an array, which we're going to do together. And we're going to create an array of these product names. And therefore, they will end up in this nice little neat package of arrays right here. And you can probably tell which one is at index number 3. So this is where you'll have to remember that we always start at 0. So 1, 2, 3, CDS, Common Data Service, is sitting there nice and neatly into index number 3. But how do you get these out when you're working inside Flow? You use advanced expressions. So in this case, if I wanted to get Flow out of as an output in Microsoft Flow, I could use this expression here that says first, and then give me the outputs from the compose array. Now, in this case, let's call this array compose array, but in Flow, we're actually going to put it in a compose action that's going to be named compose array. So since it's in a compose action, what is the array is really the outputs of that action. So in this case, we're asking for the first output of the compose array action, which is going to have as its formula right here, the actual array. And so the first one will be Flow. We didn't have to say 0 because it's the first one. And then the last one will be AI. We just have to say, give me the last one. So if we want something other than first or last, then we have to reference their actual index number. And then we don't use the first or the last function. We just use the name and the index number. And that will give us back power apps 0, 1, 2. And then that's as easy as it can be, right? Now let's get started. Now, a couple things to remember before I go into the demo is you will need to add your dynamic content. Once you have it up there, you need to click on the expression tab to make expressions. You cannot just type in the outputs of your flow actions when you want to use expressions. You have to go to the expression tab, and you have to remember to click on the OK or the update button, which is normally over here, but you'll click on those. And once you click on them, they will show in your outputs. One big habit I see people make is they'll work on their formula and then they'll click somewhere else besides OK, and it'll all be gone because we don't even save this until you click OK or update if you're making a change. So you'll want to validate that after you clicked OK or update, you actually see the formula in the inputs before you test. Okay, you want to give this a try. I do want to point out that a lot of this will involve in the part 1 and part 2 will involve data operations, conditions, and variables, which I don't know if you've worked with, but these are common ones for arrays that we'll talk about later. Okay, let's go over to Microsoft Flow. I've created a flow with a basic manual button here just to play around, and I'm going to start by creating the array. So this one I'm not going to connect to any data. I'm going to create my own array, and then we'll connect to data next, right? And this is what I'm going to call compose array, because the point of this action right here is actually to create the array. So now here I am. I need to make sure I can get over here to the dynamic content and that I click expression. Now I can type my formula, which is create array. And I'm going to actually put the same array that we were working on in PowerPoint. So it started out with flow as the first element. Notice as I type, the syntax is showing how many objects are in this array. All right, so I'm going to do flow, and then I'm going to do Power BI, and then I'm going to do Power Apps. And notice as I get over to the right and I start losing space, it backs it up for me to try to keep my cursor visible, right? So Power Apps, and after Power Apps, I'm going to add CDS, and then after CDS, I'm going to add AI. Okay, so now that I have those 5 objects there, I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that this drops into that box. Let's test and see how that worked. So I'll just perform the trigger action, which is just the button press in this case. I don't have any inputs into my button. It runs beautifully, and here's my array. Now, very important thing about arrays is that in the outputs of your JSON, you can always recognize an array because it starts with an open straight bracket and it ends with a closed straight bracket. And then in between those brackets is your array. And we have the items that we typed, and they are indexed invisibly as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's test that out. We're going to start with first and last, and then we'll do the index, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is add another compose. Now this could be a variable that I'm initializing, could be anything. I'm using compose just because it's a little easy for me to just get into it. I'm going to go to my expression, and here I think I have to start with my dynamic content, and you'll see why. I want to just kind of show you something interesting. So we made our array here, so this output right here represents the array. So if I click on it and then I hover over it, you get what this is in the peak code, all right? Maybe we say peak code. You can see that the input here is output compose array. But sometimes you can use that to help you know what to type in your expression as well. Okay, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to go back into my expression. And from the expression, I'm going to, where was I going to do first, right? FIRST, which is the function for first. all it needs is a collection. I can actually click back into dynamic content and put the output in between those parens. And you'll notice when I put it in there, it's going to translate itself to what we saw when we hovered over it, all right, which is outputs compose array. That's all I need. So I'm going to remember to click OK, and then I'm going to hit test and save and test. All right, so I'm asking for the first part of this array. And so if I open this, you'll see the first one is flow. And is that correct? Yes, it is, because the first part of this was flow. Let's quickly do the last two, just so that you don't think I'm lying. We're going to replace the word first with last, and we're going to test. Oh, sorry, I did a bad thing. Notice I didn't click OK. So don't go so fast, because if you don't click update or OK after you change a formula, it won't save. All right, so just remember to click update and kind of take an eye peek and make sure it's changed, and now you can test, okay? That's a very common mistake, especially for people like me who like to hurry up, okay? So now we've got an array with flow. What we looked for was the last one, so we should have AI, and we do, okay? So now here's the slightly tricky one, all right? If I hit edit here, I want the second item in this array. So I don't want last, which means I'm going to get rid of its closing paren as well. Instead, I'm going to open a bracket, which will automatically give me both, and type the number 2, because actually what I want back is power apps. So I'm going to hit update here and test again. And just to remind you, I remember how many numbers there are in here because I've typed this. But if you look at your array, power apps is at index 2. Flow is 0, Power BI is 1, Power Apps is 2. So if I open the compose, you'll see that Power Apps is what comes out. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Audrey, we don't actually sit there and type arrays. We get them from real data. Okay, I got you. So I'm going to take you back to my flows and open up a situation where I'm actually listing items from an Excel spreadsheet. So let me just show you that spreadsheet. Here it is. Basically, the table is what you see here in blue and black. And I added this index that's not in the table. It's just to remind you that even though this is bigger, right, because there are multiple properties in this array, each property coming from a different column, it's still it's still 5 indexes. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 being this entire row is index number 4. Okay, so let's just quickly look at that. I'm just going to test the listing of the items in the table. And you'll see if I open this up, we'll give it a minute. I think it just takes a couple of seconds. I open this up, takes 4 seconds. And I'm going to copy the JSON out of the body and put it in a notepad so we can look at it. Again, just like before, the beginning of an array is started with a bracket, and the end of array is an end bracket. So you can immediately tell this is an array. Beginning bracket, end bracket. Now each row of that table represents an object in the array, each one having multiple properties from those columns. Now it gave us some stuff we didn't really need, which is Excel friendly stuff, but we still get the columns that we wanted. They're right here. So, but we have index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4 from our JSON. Now, let's do the same pulls that we did before with this more complex data. So I'm going to do compose again, and I'm going to do first. Now, first and last are the same, so I won't do both. I'll just do first, all right? Again, I'm going to go over to my expression area, and I'm going to do first. Now, in between first, I want that array. Whenever you have a list of items like this, the value list of items represents the array. When I press that, notice it put it in there for me, and it put underscores, excuse me, underscores where the spaces are, because we can't have spaces in these expressions. And then I'm going to say okay, and let's run a test on this. All right, run that flow. Flow ran successfully. If we open this original get items for the list, you'll see that the very first object here in this list is the one about checking Dropbox account for new files, which is assigned to David and is completed. So that's the one we should get in our output here, and we did. Okay, so in this case, the input and the output are the same because we used the function at the root of the compose, right? So its input was the function index, and that's what it gave us as an output as well. All right, so now let's go find something in the middle. So let's get that second index item again. Again, I'm going to take off first in the front, and I'm going to take off the back paren. And instead of that back paren, I'm going to open a bracket and type the number 2. It put the closing bracket in there. So I'm asking for index 2 from this array. I'm going to be sure to click the update first, and then I'm going to run my test. Okay, so what should be 2? Let's take a peek at our OneNote again. So this is 0, this first one here. This is 1. So we should get this one about alerting security about the new employee for James, which is not started. All right, so let's run our flow. And let's see what we get. And that's exactly what we got. Easy peasy. All right, now the last thing we're going to do is see if we can pull a certain property out of this. Okay, so I'm going to hit edit, and then I'm going to rename this just so I remember. This is going to be compose index query. So we queried by an index number. Now I'm going to add another compose. And on this one, I'm going to drill into this. So again, I'm actually going to use the same expression that I used up here. So I can actually copy it. So I'm going to copy this expression because I'm going to use the same expression. And I can't just paste it here. Remember, you can't type expressions like this unless you're in advanced mode. So you have to go to the expression, and any copy and pasting you do in the expression area. Okay? So now that I have it in there, it's a bona fide expression. If it's not color-coded, it's not going to work. So if I paste this over here, notice there's no colors. That's not going to work. Okay? And if you're working in advanced mode over here, it'll start with an @ sign. All right, and that will give you a tip that it will work. All right, so now I'm going to specifically call for index number 2. I'm going to call for the column issues to do. All right, just to remind you, look at the spreadsheet. I'm looking at index number 2, and I'm asking for the value of issues to do. Okay, all right, I'm going to click OK. Let's run a test on this. Something I forgot to do. It looks like I have, that's wrong. So I'm going to do this a little bit different. Let's start over and let's just type first. And let's go get our output. So now, oh, we don't want the compose index output. We want the list of items. So just do first, the value here. And so now I've got the right body in there. And we'll do the 2, and we'll do the issues to do. Let's just see if we're spelling that right. Issue to do, not issues. Issue to do, update. Did somebody catch that before? I bet you somebody did. I bet you one of you out there were like screaming, Audrey, you don't have an S, you don't have an S. And there's our second issue to do. And it worked out just beautifully. And that is your introduction to arrays. You even got to see me troubleshoot a mistake. And This is just to get you started for you beginners learning what an array is. In part 2, which will be next month, I'm going to take this from an intermediate level and look at some of the things you can do with arrays.